Hi, I'm Fred Satilli, and this is episode 20 of the Voters Union of Accountability Nation podcast. And today I'd like to talk about the open mind and the value of you having an open mind and the value of you opening another person's mind so that you two can communicate. And this is a subject that's given me great consternation over the time of the career of my own activism. The ability to reach people. Our problem is people who we're trying to reach don't see the value of what we have to offer, and a lot of times we don't make an attempt to see perhaps the value in what they have to offer. So the problem really is that for most of us, we don't define our message enough. We have a nebulous idea about the value of freedom, but don't even know what freedom is. The funny part is no one else knows what it is either. You think you do, but let's talk about it. What does freedom look like for you? Because it's not the same for everybody. When you're in jail, your food, your bed, your medical care, and even your social atmosphere are provided. For some, this is freedom. There are literally no responsibilities. Some people give their responsibilities over to the Lord. They say, I've found a great deal of freedom in giving my responsibilities over to the Lord, and that's, once again, freed them from the responsibility of having to consider those things. They say the Lord will provide, and they ignore their responsibility to provide for themselves. And in the same vein, a great many people say the government will provide, and thereby relinquishing them of the responsibility, and thereby, in their mind, they're free from all that responsibility. You know, one of the biggest shackles of your life is your responsibilities. This is something that goes on when you're a little baby child. When you're a little baby child, you're completely free. You don't know that you're being provided for. You don't know that you're either nursing or food is being provided or the warmth of your environment is being provided. You're free from all those things. You're free to just learn and learn. That's all you're doing. You're taking in information. You're seeing shapes and colors and hearing voices, and you're sucking it in. You have complete freedom. At some point, when you're 1.5, 2 years old, 3 years old, maybe, depending on the parenting method that your parents are using, they begin to give you responsibilities. And that is when your freedom starts to wane. They say, look, you need to clean up your room or put away your toys, or, you need to do something. And at that moment, all of your time is no longer your own. You're serving a master at that point. And your freedom is certainly not gone, but the beginning of it is curtailed. I was in court facing jury duty, and during the voir dire, one young man said, I never worked a day in my life, and nor will I ever. His luxuriance of ignorance was his path to freedom. He didn't know, he didn't care, he didn't want to know, he wasn't going to be made to care. He was just going to nurse at the breast of the government, and that was the lifestyle that he wanted. He was genuinely going to have a life of complete freedom. So you have to ask yourself, what does freedom look like to you? That's what freedom looked like to that kid. He was going to be free through ignorance. So you ask yourself, is your freedom the freedom to attain knowledge? You can't go to school for this. I mean, you can get knowledge in school, but you can't buy knowledge in school. You can't get knowledge. You can't get an education. Your education is what you keep, what you retain from all the experiences you have. If the experiences are in school and you retain some of that knowledge, if you're education is on the street and you retain some of that knowledge, and all of that education, not what you're told, not what you've seen, but what you've retained is your education. Now, in my case, I recognized that school was more indoctrination than education, and I realized this in about the junior high. The first thing they taught me in elementary school, the very first thing they taught me was line up and be quiet. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? That's the first thing they taught. Everybody has to be quiet. Everybody has to line up. Everybody has to be orderly. Now, I love order, but it's a strange place to start. They didn't tell me the features and benefits of an orderly society. They didn't tell me why it was good. They just told me I had to do it. Line up and shut up. Okay? Were you taught this? Yes, you were. You bet you were. That's the basis of public school education, right? Conform, conform, conform. Don't step out of line. Okay? How does freedom look to you? Is it the freedom to raise your children in your own belief system? Don't make me laugh. The schools, TV, computers, their friends, and their own hormones have at least 90% of their attention. You're not their primary source of education unless you really, really work at it and intend that to be, and you spend all day doing it. In a case of great many traditional families, the idea was that the father would give his wife complete freedom to spend all of her time focused on raising the children, giving them their work ethic, the things to believe in, all of their ethics. So the father was providing the mother this freedom. Now parents don't have this freedom. The father's got responsibilities, the mother's got responsibilities outside the home, and therefore the home is neglected. The children are raised by the great unwashed masses. All right? How about the freedom to live without fear? Right? The baby child lives without fear. They're fearless. They're running around, experiencing things, learning. They live without fear. They don't know fear yet. They haven't, been put in situations where they were in peril. But we have a government that controls the population through fear. Just obeying the law is a nightmare. I mean, do I have to say the IRS? Do I have to say lawyers? Do I have to say bureaucrats, unreasonable, insane judges, people at various, Division of Motor Vehicles or any kind of social service thing, or just a zoning ordinance, or it could be just about anything, right? Traffic laws. You're constantly living in fear, What does freedom look like to you? How about the freedom to keep the money you earn? Okay? Now, this is a really near and dear to my heart issue, because the issue here is slavery. Not many people feel the impact of this, but my definition of slavery is when your life, your time, your capital, which is your mind and your ability, is taken from you without recognition and without compensation, as if by right of the other person, right? So here's a good example. Say I buy a car for $20,000. Here in California, we have 10% tax. The government feels that they have a right to take $2,000 from me. Now, if I make $20 an hour, that's 100 hours of my life that my labor, I'm going to do that labor and hand over the benefit of that labor to a government that is never going to say thank you. Let me pose it to you this way. When was the last time you heard a politician say, "Oh, ladies and gentlemen, I really want to thank you for all the labor you did to provide us with all this money"? You're never going to hear them say that, because as far as they're concerned, that money is handed over to them by right. They have a right to that money. They think it's theirs. They don't see any reason to thank you. You have to give them that money. It's their right to take that money, and they do it. And the idea of the example of buying a car. Say you don't even have a car, right? So you're not going to pay the gas tax, right? No, not at all. Every bite of food you eat has been brought here by truck, and especially if you get it from Amazon, then it's right to your door by truck. And the cost of that food, the gas tax for the fuel for those trucks is figured into that cost of that food, and you pay it. So there it is, you have that. Now, another thing that I consider part of my freedom is the freedom to speak plainly. The freedom to speak plainly is an important issue to me. Not only now do we have speech that is forbidden, but we have speech that is compelled. There are things that you must say or be silent. And that's, that's a whole issue unto itself, but that's a freedom that's important to me, but it may not be important to somebody that you're trying to communicate with and trying to get them to see things the way you see them. They might not give a damn about freedom of speech because, frankly, they may have nothing to say. So what does freedom look like to you? Something that's constantly a concern of mine is the freedom to support socially agreeable companies. The truth is, we don't even know where our products and services come from. In many cases, we give our money to corporations who stab us in the back. The man-haters of Verizon comes to mind. The Ford Foundation giving money to La Raza comes to mind. The NFL comes to mind this week, right? I mean, money goes in, and where does it go? It doesn't go to a place that's in agreement with my values or my agenda or what's important to me. It goes to groups that are antithetical to that, So anyway, this list could go on. And if your definition of freedom is all these things and many more, well, that's why you can't get people to agree with you, because your definition is so broad that you can't listen to other people and find out what they need and then search for common ground. You can't just hit them with this. Our political party is concerned with freedom. You might have just spoken to the kid at the VUAN who his idea of freedom is never having a job a day in your life. So, just by saying that word, you're not communicating. You need to communicate that a lot better. Now, if you talk with them and you find out their definition of freedom, what's important to them, you may be able to talk about your definitions of freedom and back and forth, his, yours, and at some point you're going to find common ground. And when you do, now you're making a friend. You have somebody who can trust you because you have something in common, and you can actually trust him, And, once you get that one issue, then you can expand out from there and hopefully bring in other issues and find more and more common ground until you find out that two of you agree much more. And then one of two or both of two things interesting are going to happen. And those things are, one, that person may find that he agrees with you a lot more than he thinks, and you may find out that you agree with him a lot more than you think. And if that happens, that's good, because that's learning. Remember that education thing, what you keep? You'll find that most people don't know what freedom is. You'll find that they don't know what liberty is. And you'll find that they don't know what rights are either. Work it out together. Define these things. You must have a really serious understanding and definition of these things before you can begin to discuss them with each other. Ask yourself what they mean to you and find out what they mean to the other person. Your education, as well as their own, depends on this. And when you come to consensus, then you're ready for a meeting of the minds, because both minds are open.